Okay, that sounds like a good time to start. Right. Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Fenello, and I'm the Executive Director at EVCOM. Delighted to welcome you all this afternoon. I believe that more than ever, this year has taught us the importance of working collaboratively. So it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the HBAA to create a program of events and content that caters to our intersection of audiences and to both our wider audiences. International Women's Day, or in our case, month, has provided us with the opportunity to celebrate some of the amazing women in our industry today and to hear their perspectives on its future. Before we get going with today's discussion, I would like to take a moment to flag some of the events that we have coming up in this next month. So it's a full schedule. We have this coming Thursday on the 11th, we have our Talking Pictures event, which is Women in Film. Next Wednesday, on the 17th of March, we have Bridging the Support Gap in the Meetings, Events and Accommodation Industry. The following Wednesday, the 24th, we have a perspective on the events industry from the next generation. And then the final Wednesday of the month, on the 31st, we have Aspirational Women in the Corporate Film Industry. We will also be having something called Focusing on the Focus Awards, and that's a date TBC because that will be a pre-recorded conversation. But that's the young generation of filmmakers, and it focuses on the new awards that we launched last year for them. Can I also ask that if you have any questions, could you please put them in the chat box, because then the speakers can see that. And we will try to get them answered before the end of the session. And then just to remind you that this is a recorded session and it will be made available through EVCOM's website and our YouTube channel by about lunchtime tomorrow afternoon. But without further ado, I shall pass you over to our facilitator today, Leigh Jagger. Leigh has worked in the industry for 30 years, so has an enormous amount of experience, and what she doesn't know about the sector isn't worth knowing. So I'm going to hand you over to Leigh right now.
Thank you very much, Claire. That certainly makes me feel and sound very old indeed. But anyway, we'll move on from that. So as Claire said, I have been in the industry for a while, and that's across various aspects of it. So, you know, I think I kicked off with training courses many, many moons ago. I've even worked in a venue, commercial conferences, but I guess for the vast majority of my career, I was at Bank Sadler, first as their MD and then as CEO for 18 years until they were acquired by Amex GBT in 2017. And since then, I've been acting as a non-executive to a number of companies, both in and outside our industry sector. And I have to say, I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting this session today with such a distinguished panel of successful leaders in our industry. I've known all of them for many years as friends, as colleagues, as venue partners, as worthy competitors, and so it's been great to hear their views and thoughts on some of the key topics that we're going to discuss today. Do send your questions through so we can make it as inclusive as possible, but I've got a lot of questions I can fire at them in the meantime. But before we get started on that, I thought it would be nice to hear from each of our panelists just a little bit of a potted history on their background. And I'll just go across the order I've got you in my screen. So Helen, if you don't mind kicking off, that'd be fabulous.
Of course, thanks, Leigh. Hello, everybody. My name is Helen Mccabe. I'm the Managing Director of BCDME here in the UK. I'm starting to feel old as well when I just give you a bit of background as to my journey within this world of events. I joined what was Business Reservations in 1991, so it's my big 30th year this year, and mainly worked in the operational environment. And joined the Zybrant board many years ago, and then obviously we were acquired by BCD a few years ago now, and now I am the Managing Director, as I said, for the UK.
Thank you very much. Katie, can we move on to you? Do you mind?
Absolutely. For 24 years, all of my career has been spent with manager in the beautiful Marriott in Aberdeen. If anybody has been to the Marriott in Aberdeen, you know it's anything but beautiful. But I absolutely fell in love with it, and it was the beginning of my career. So I've been incredibly fortunate to hold various sales roles in the organisation. I'm currently the area leader for our sales and distribution teams in Eastern Europe, which is a phenomenal experience. I can't tell you how much I've learned looking after about 60 hotels in 13 different countries and 7 different time zones. My day starts really early, as you can imagine. But it's been a wonderful experience for me. And on the 1st of April, I transition into a new role, and I will be the Senior Director of Sales Operations for Europe, Middle East and Africa. So yeah, really delighted to be able to talk to you and be part of this panel this afternoon.
Great, congratulations. Sue, can you give us a little bit of your history?
Hi, yes, thank you, Leigh. So I started my career in tour operating, actually, at Intersun Holidays, if anybody remembers it. And I loved that time in tour operation. I was a rep, dare I say, in Rhodes in the late 80s. And then I moved back to the UK and I worked in retail travel, in travel agency. I had a great time with travel agents like Travel World, Tony Iredale Travel in Yorkshire. Then I moved into what I wanted to do, which was incentive travel for a company called CMM. I worked with them for 5 years. And then I founded my own business in 2001, which was, yes, Your Event Solutions, of which is 20 years old this May. And 2 years ago, made the decision to be acquired by North America's leading travel company, Travel Leaders. So I've been with them now 2 years, and I sit on the board of Internova Travel Leaders for the parent group. And I'm still leading the team at Yes, and enjoying this new world that we're all navigating and punching our way through it.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. Now, our fourth panelist today was meant to be Jackie Continuity. And unfortunately, fortunately, actually, Jackie can't be with us today because she's taken part in an RFP, which is great news for all of us, isn't it? That there's some activity out there. So I'm delighted, just in time, to welcome Charlotte Gentry from Pure, who was at the very last minute stepped in to take Jackie's place. So Charlotte, I don't know if you can hear us. We've had a few technical glitches. Can we hand over to you for a little introduction?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes. Yeah.
Fabulous. That's great. Apologies for being a little bit late to the party. I'm Charlotte Gentry, CEO and founder of Pure Communications Group. I've had the agency, which used to be known as Pure Events, for the last 18 years or so. It's been an interesting 12 to 14 months. We have adapted and evolved and done some really exciting work actually over the last year. But we are obviously looking forward to producing some live events at the back end of this year, and very, very excited to be part of the panel today with such inspiring women.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So a wealth of experience on our panel to tap into. Okay, where to start? So given that we're here to celebrate International Women's Day and recognise the wonderful leaders that we've got, I thought that possibly a good place to kick off would be gender equality. Now, obviously, we've done a lot in our industry so far, but probably still more to do. And I just wondered how the panel thought our industry was doing. We've got a high percentage of females, but how does that translate into equality at a leadership level? Now, I thought maybe that would be quite a good place for you to kick off, Sue. You just said that you've just on the board at Travel Leaders. It would be interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I have to say it's, as straightforward as a Yorkshire girl is, it's actually been really, really, really interesting and really great. I didn't expect it to be, and I'll be very honest, going from a small family business to a large multi-conglomerate, run with a head office out of New York. I honestly thought I would have, and still do pretty much, have imposter syndrome every day, but it is unbelievably welcoming. A mass amount of equality, many people on the board with me at capacity, and very much welcomed, very, very much welcomed. So I'm actually really find it refreshing that I don't have any worries whatsoever that I found working with a new large organisation. I feel very much heard and very much part of it.
That's fabulous. And would you say that your team that moved over with you would sort of concur with that?
Yeah, I think it's exciting for them. I really do. I think it very much is giving them opportunities that they perhaps, I hate to say, probably wouldn't have had if we'd have just stayed UK centric or European centric. So the opportunities have been fantastic for the team, and I see that continuing. You know, once we're out of this rocky past year that we've been in, of course, for everybody. Yeah, I think they do. I think they're learning every day, and you know, that's exactly what we all need to be doing.
Great. And Katie, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that from a sort of, you've been with Marriott many years. How have you seen that change over the years? I mean, a big global corporate like that, what sort of, you know, have you faced barriers? Do you think that there's equity at the leadership level within Marriott?
Yeah, you know, in preparation for this discussion, honestly, I can't remember time. First of all, you know, traditionally a female-oriented.
Sorry, Katie, can I just interrupt for a minute? Is everybody else struggling with sound?
And when I go on mute, I struggle to hear Katie. That's why I've just taken myself back off mute.
Okay. Katie, could I just ask you to possibly start that little bit of your conversation again? I do apologize. I'm not sure why we're having such problems, but could I just ask if anybody isn't speaking to go put themselves on mute, and we'll go again. But we're trying to fix it at the back end, but we don't quite know what the problem is, but we'll work on it. But if you could possibly start again, I do apologize. Thank you.
So let me know if this is better, and if not, I'll take out my earphones. The reason I have them in is because we have a lot of dogs in the house, and if they hear voices, we usually get some interruption. But is that better now, Claire?
Okay. I mean, my colleague has suggested just lean forward, but I don't think that's making any difference.
Katie, I'm still
Okay, I'm going to take out my earphones and see if that helps.
That's much better. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Great. So let's do it that way. I was saying that I keep my earphones in so that all of the dogs in the house don't hear other voices. So we might have a little bit of other interruption from the extended members of my family. So I apologize in advance. So yeah, Leigh, I was saying that, you know, I've never really been aware of any gender inequality in Marriott, and I think that's because first and foremost, hotels were traditionally you know, female-dominated industry, and you know, Marriott at its heart is still a family-run organization. You know, we have Mr. Marriott that's still involved, and his parents who founded the organization. You know, his mum was very actively involved, and I think that has, you know, continued as a very strong part of our culture throughout all of these years. And you know, and I think we've refined it. We're very much focused now, not just on female opportunity and having strong female leadership, but, you know, whatever your race, your preference, you know, your background, we very much are 100% focused on gender equality. So for me, I have never been aware of any barriers in my career. You know, every opportunity that I've explored, you know, I've always felt that I've been equally at the table with every other candidate, whether they're male, female, you know, whatever their background. So, you know, I really was, you know, pondering over this and thinking, has it been an issue historically? And I genuinely, it's not something that I'm aware of within my organisation.
Well, that's really reassuring to hear completely. And so, I mean, I guess, you know, diversity and inclusion isn't just around, as you pointed out, it's not just around gender equality. And I know the focus this year for International Women's Day is about choose to challenge. And Helen, maybe if I can come to you, do you think there's still some barriers that we do need to sort of to get over to make sure that we are more equal and inclusive in our world?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is just an enormous topic. We could sit and talk about this for an hour in itself, Leigh, couldn't we? You know, BCD and BCDME obviously is part of that. We go quite deep on this subject matter. We have a senior director out in the US who this is his sole responsibility. And we're going through an enormous amount of clinics and workshops to really understand what this means. And this starts with the leadership team globally. Before we even touch a policy, before we even really, you know, start and take that forward externally as well. So there's a huge amount of internal communication, education going on within the business across the whole estate. So yeah, it is quite a big topic in itself. But yeah, there's lots of work being done. for sure within our organisation, and it's absolutely of paramount importance that we do that. So yeah.
Yeah, good to hear. I mean, as you say, we could talk about diversity and inclusion for the full hour in itself, but just in the interest of making sure we cover all the subjects you wanted to, I would like to move you on to something maybe a little bit more personal, if you don't mind. So, I mean, clearly we all know that, you know, senior leadership positions in any industry, especially in ours, can be particularly stressful, can be lonely. And I guess the current pandemic has only added to that, really. And I want to talk a little bit about mental health and stress. And, you know, all good organisations have got wellbeing programmes for their employees. But I just wanted to touch a little bit on you guys and who looks after the boss and how you do that, because, you know, there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders. And I wonder, maybe, Charlotte, would you like to take that first?
Sure. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I think I'm an entrepreneur, essentially, largely through and through, in terms of the way that I operate. And so my brain never really stops working, I suppose. And therefore, I never really switch off, ever. And I think certainly over the last year, we live in central London, but actually we've moved to the countryside, which has made quite a big difference, just because we physically couldn't actually fit into the property that we have in London, based on working from home conditions. But I do try definitely to make the time and have those guilty pleasures that allow me a little bit of headspace. I mean, combined with the fact that I had a baby 11 months ago as well, on top of everything else. So I think it's as somebody who leads a business, you spend your entire life worrying about the people within the business and looking after them. And it is very easy not to look after yourself, because the focus is always on others. And I think anyhow, actually, as a woman, that spans life in general, for women, because you spend your entire life looking after everybody else in your family most of the time as well. And so you tend to be slightly down the food chain when it comes to looking after yourself, but it's finding the right outlet. And for me, certainly it's probably been swimming, actually, over the last year, and having the ability to be able to do that, and just taking that half an hour out and trying not to feel guilty about it. It's just giving yourself the headspace to actually even be happy that you're enabling yourself to do that.
Great. I mean, I think we all want to know, what guilty pleasures have you found over lockdown?
Can't possibly divulge that because they're too guilty for words. Terrible sitcoms I would probably suggest on television, and we'll probably go into a whole conversation around that on its own.
Okay. So can I sort of throw that back over to you, because I think it's such an important topic. You know, even on airlines, they say, you know, you put your own oxygen mask on first before you tend to anyone else. How have you been looking after your own mental health?
I think, you know, this has been going on for not just this last 12 months, you know, as Charlotte just said, you know, our minds never stop. But I think that I work in quite a straightforward, fun environment. And I think, luckily, I have a great team of people, and people who have worked for me in the past as well and have moved on to other great things have also been there. I think it's a great trait as a human being to be able to also ask for help. I think we think that it's a weak link if we ask for help, and it isn't. Because I know when somebody asks me for help, I love to help them. And if I reverse that on someone else, they love to help you right back. So my team have always been amazing, you know, in the main. I also think, you know, in this industry, our customers, and Katie, you might agree with this, our customers and our suppliers also become a great source of help. And I feel like I'm just plugging my new employer, but I'm well led by a CEO and a board where, you know, you get a text asking how you are, and I've never had that in 20 years, so it's lovely. So that's great. And I have 2 daughters who keep me completely grounded, take me out for a run, introduce me to yoga, and seeing quite a lot more of me. So from that perspective, that's been helpful as well. You don't realize how much you needed it until you kind of come off that absolute treadmill. And like Charlotte, my guilty pleasures are often in a you know, a nice glass of vino and Netflix. And acting like a 1970s mother doing all the cooking and cleaning again. I don't think it happens to me. But we find our ways.
I think that's a really valid point, actually. You know, you talk about how, you know, you're enjoying things that you didn't really previously had time for. I mean, Helen, if I come to you and ask you, I mean, do you think that this whole new revisiting of our work-life balance, do you think there's going to be good, important things that you can hang on to, and you're going to go back and re-emerge into the new world with a slightly different perspective?
Yeah, I think, you know, we've mentioned before, haven't we, about wouldn't it be great if we could find some sort of compromise between where we are now and where we were sort of 18 months ago. I do think that, you know, the human connection element of what everybody seems to be missing right now is something that, you know, people are going to put a paramount importance on. You know, as things start to be lifted, as restrictions start to be lifted. But I do think that people have found a way of still connecting, even online now. And there are still ways of, you know, collaborating, having meetings, as much as we don't necessarily like the virtual world as much as the face-to-face. So, but I do think that people will protect themselves a little bit more, and try and, as I say, strike that happy medium, as you call it, or a compromise. I think, you know, it needs to be in the forefront of everybody's minds to get the balance right going forward. And I think we could do that.
Sorry, I was struggling to get myself off mute there. I think, do you think, in a funny way, I mean, I know there's been lots of negatives to the whole situation we found ourselves in, but do you think that all of the home working has forced employers to sort of reconsider that as a viable option, especially at senior levels as well? So do you think in terms of returning women, I mean, Charlotte, this is maybe a good question for you. I mean, I know you're in a slightly different position, but, you know, people coming back from maternity leave who perhaps from an events or travel perspective didn't want to go back on that cycle of traveling and being away from home. Do you think there's more sort of willingness now within the industry to consider senior roles where people do spend more time working at home?
I think so. I mean, I think that I think working from home, well, certainly the last 12, 14 months has really shown everybody that actually it's more intense working from home than it is actually going into an office. I mean, I think, you know, in an office you get the connection of talking to people on a day-to-day basis. You get that ability to sort of step away from what you're doing immediately. When you're working from home, I think from an employer's perspective, you have the fear of whether people are actually being pulled in lots of different directions when they're working from home with their kids, or, you know, there's lots of moving parts. But actually, everybody's now very well set up for a working from home environment. We personally would absolutely always want to inject a level of everybody being in the office on specific days of the week. And there will definitely be a combination of the two, of a level of working from home and working from the office. Because I think as a communications industry, which is essentially what we are, it's very hard. You can't really be creative when you're all working from remote locations. You can't, that sense of cohesion and that sense of brainstorming and creativity is much harder to achieve.
I think we've just had quite an interesting question come through that sort of feeds into that quite nicely from Michael Hurst. Do the panelists feel that women, because of that, their organisational skills and, you know, potentially even more so at home, and their empathy with people, are then better equipped to be successful in our industry? So I don't know, Sue, let's go with you because you thought that was a great question.
I thought it was a very clever question. I had to read it twice. It was so clever. No, I mean, it's hard to say that, really, isn't it? I think everybody should be judged equally. I really do. I think, you know, I think as long as you're humble and you have humility, I think you can be successful. And I don't think, you know, it is necessarily because you're a woman that you can do that. You know, I've sat with many a great guy who's been able to help me in many a situation. But I do think, Michael, it is a great question. And what did you say here? To be successful and excel, you know, I think just being yourself, just keep being yourself. There is nothing better than being yourself and being humble and always ready to learn. And always ready to embrace kind of new friendships and new people in your life, and I think that gets you through, and especially at this time, you know, in the world right now in the industry.
So can I pass that over to you, Katie? What do you concur with what Sue's just said? Do you think it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, or do you think some of those traits are sort of more in the female domain?
Yeah, no, I actually was going to say to Michael, I think I can tell you about lots of women that I work with that are completely disorganized, completely unempathetic, and so I agree, with what Sue just said. I think it's really about you and your outlook on life, I think, isn't it, and how you interact with people, what values you have, and how you take them into the workplace with you. And I think that's what makes a great leader. And when I look at some of the the fantastic leaders that I've worked with, that I've learned from, and I think about my own parents, they had a family business, I grew up in a family business. I look at the way that they treated the people that they worked with, it was all about taking very strong values into the workplace. So I think whether you are male or female is irrelevant. I think it's about your skill set and your ability to be empathetic, but also to think, be constantly reinventing yourself, and this is a really good example we just talked about this past year of how we've all had to change the way that we work. I have spent the past 15 years traveling and living away from home. So for a year I've been at home, and the good news is my husband and I are still married after 15 years apart. We've had this time together again. I think he's very much looking forward to me going back to traveling again, let's put it that way. But I think you have to constantly evolve, and if you don't evolve in the workplace and the way that you are and the way that you interact with people as you see different generations coming through your organization, then you will become obsolete as well. So yeah, I think it's a great question from Michael, but in my experience, I don't think it's about male or female. It's about the values that you take with you in everything that you do.
Great, thank you. Now, clearly you're all very successful, accomplished, confident women. I guess what we all want to know really is, do you ever suffer from crisis of confidence? I mean, Sue, you mentioned earlier imposter syndrome, and you face it every day. Do you all, and how do you cope with it? I mean, Helen, can we kick off with you? Because I know it's something that you and I have talked a lot about.
Do you really have to kick off with me on this?
Sorry.
Yes, I do suffer from imposter syndrome a lot. As you know, I think Sunday evenings are irregular for me to think, oh no, it's Sunday night again. Can I do next week? I mean, the last 18 months in particular have been very, very difficult with questioning your judgment, your skills, the decisions that you make on a regular basis. We're human, of course we get imposter syndrome. But I think what you have to do is you have to sit back and look at all of the good decisions that you've made, have a great team around you. We keep talking about teamwork a lot today. That's within my leadership team here in the UK, or the global executive team that I work with as well. It's a lot of collaboration, a lot of having each other's back. And as soon as then I get back up on a Monday morning, back into work again, it disappears, immediately, which I'm sure is a regular for a lot of people on the panel today. But fake it till you make it, I say, and I'm still faking it in my mid-50s. So,
Thank you for your honesty. I mean, I think you've just touched on it. We're in uncharted waters, right? There's no rule book, there's no management guidebook that can talk you through how to manage in this particular scenario. And Charlotte, you come across as one of the most confident women I know. Is there? Have you ever had moments of crisis or self-doubt, given everything that we're facing right now?
I think I've been. I'm going to use the word prudent, but I think I've always had somebody that works with me that I'm able to sense check my behavior with. I can be, I term myself to some people like Marmite, and I think, I am very direct, and that can be a problem for some people. But I started my own business when I was 25, and I've never worked for anybody else. So I've had to walk into big pitches from a very young age, pretending that I am much bigger than I've ever been. I've been through the 2008 recession. That was a very grown-up learning curve and a very, very quick period of time, I nearly lost everything. I learned what it was like to nearly go bankrupt. I had to pull myself back up by my bootstraps. And so I push the boundaries of where my comfort zone is all the time. As an example, we're doing a broadcast tomorrow. Do I feel 100% confident of sitting in front of 6 cameras and doing this broadcast tomorrow? No, probably not. But you know, when I complete it, it's a bit like climbing a live wire. You know, up a crevice. You know, when you're scared of heights, you do it, and you feel so immensely proud of what you've done after you do it. That makes it all the more worthwhile.
Thank you for your honesty too. I think, you know, actually I'd like to come back over to Sue, because you mentioned it right at the very start. And, you know, from my perspective, I've got a teenage daughter, and, you know, I'm regularly talking about the fact that I still fake it till I make it. You know, you have to just put a face on, go out there. You've been through quite a similar journey to Helen in a way. You've gone from a smaller organization which got bigger and bigger, and now you're part of a, you know, a global player. Is that something that's tested your confidence levels, Sue?
Every day, Leigh, every day. And you know, often I just don't feel worthy in many ways. Walking into a pitch, like Charlotte just said, or walking into a meeting room in New York, or walking into the office of a team full of great people who are working really hard, you know, that they're looking to me perhaps for answers. So, and I don't mind admitting it, actually. I've got to a stage, hit the big number only a few weeks ago, and realize that, you know, it's okay to admit the imposter syndrome. I think, and I love what Helen said about faking it till you make it, you know, but you mentioned having, you know, your teenage daughter, Leigh. I equally have 2 daughters, 16 and 12. And, you know, you have to keep going and show them and empower them and show them that it's okay to not feel okay some days. And some days, you know, I'll come off a call and I'll be absolutely buzzing. I'll walk into the kitchen and they'll see me come alive. So I think that thrive, gosh, I'm using a Meghan Markle word here. How dare I? You know, that keeps you thriving. Oh, good grief. We won't talk about that. That will keep us all day. But, you know, it keeps you thriving. And then there's some days where you come off, and I don't know if you ladies do, or anybody who is listening in, you think, oh, did I say that right? I'll do it after this call. I'll be like, oh, you know, I'll ask my husband, hopefully he's listening somewhere, you know, and I'll say, oh, did I sound okay? But that's okay. That's all right to be like that. And as I just said to Michael, you know, we have to be humble, and we have to say that, you know, every day is not a wedding day. As my nana used to say, there's a lot of wash days.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. And a motto to live by. I think you're right. Women can be their own worst critics. And I think the honesty from you ladies today is really refreshing, because I think, you know, to know that some of the most experienced and talented women in the industry still have some of those moments, I think it's great to hear for people at whatever stage in their career that they're in. I guess that takes us quite nicely, you know, from what you've just said. So, you know, you're acting as this model for your daughters and, you know, hopefully our sons as well. But, you know, there's a lot of excellent mentoring programs now in the industry, which possibly weren't in place when we were sort of coming up through the ranks, you know, like the Fast Forward. And you know, talking about Meghan Markle, you know, you can't be it if you don't see it. So it'd be really great to hear from you guys, like, who has been your inspiration? Where have you got your support from? Have you had mentors? And you know, who's really made the difference? And Katie, can we kick off with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say my first ever mentor was my mum. You know, I mentioned earlier that my parents ran a family business. We were in transport. They had a bus company, you know, very male-dominated world. You know, and I was involved in the family business. And my mum was somebody that just wanted to be a housewife. She didn't want to be involved in any kind of business. You know, she wanted to have kids. That was it. You know, she didn't want to work. And actually, to see her in the work environment was really inspirational, because she was a tough, you know, I think Sue said, you know, being a Yorkshire woman, I'm also a Yorkshire woman. So, you know, my mum was a, you know, down to earth, straightforward Yorkshire lady, but she was very happy to make decisions. She was very happy to take the lead on things. She was constantly put in an environment that she didn't really want to be in, but she didn't particularly have a lot of choice. You know, she instilled a very strong, apologies.
The dog agrees with you.
Sorry Sorry, do you want to move to somebody else and then come back to me, Leigh?
Okay. Charlotte, I don't know, do you want to kick in from there?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My answer is quite similar, actually, to Katie's, in that I grew up with two very, very headstrong parents, both of whom were entrepreneurs, and both still are actually, even in their 70s. And so I was basically brought up to believe that you can do absolutely anything you want to if you've got the tenacity to do it. And so I struggle a little bit. You know, I'm not very good with people who feel that there's a level of entitlement now to what they should be able to have without having to really work for it, because I've been brought up completely by my parents to believe that, you know, as long as you work hard, you can do absolutely anything and you can achieve the impossible. And that's kind of the advice that I would give to anybody coming up through their own career journey. Is to deal with the confidence issues and to have a better team around you. And I have always, you know, had mentors either within the business or externally. Some have worked and some haven't worked so well. And I think it's important to be able to have that sounding board to make you feel like you're, on some days, you're not going completely mad. And, you know, that you're making the right choices. So mentorship's really important.
Okay. I mean, it sounds to me from what we've heard so far that you've both, or all three, have had really solid inspiration from your home backgrounds. One of the questions that's just coming in that I think is very relevant, and maybe, Helen, that you could sort of talk to this from the BCD side of things, is how much time do you invest in supporting and empowering the women who are less fortunate, who possibly don't have that sort of self-confidence or sort of motivation from, you know, for whatever reason, and what would you recommend for more junior staff in terms of how they can get involved?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you know, and from internally within the organisation, we do a lot of internal mentoring schemes, not just for women, but for you know, anybody within the business. We have circle of influence, so we have influential partnerships, not necessarily official mentoring, and I think it's we need to be mindful of the fact that they come in various guises at various stages of individuals' career, depending on where they're at in their crossroads, what decisions they want to take within their career path. So I think I often call it more of an influential role rather than a formal mentoring role, because then I think it actually resonates with the individuals far more than just officially calling it a mentor. I mean, I've had official mentors in my career, but I have been influenced by so many people that I've worked with, including grown-up children now. They influence me daily. So I think we need to make sure that you widen the circle of influence, whether that's clients, suppliers, internally, and best from anybody you interact with, really.
Great, thank you. I mean, you know, we've talked a lot about positive experiences, but sometimes negative experiences can be just as influential to us, and it can really make sure that we learn from those. And so I wondered if anyone was feeling honest enough that they'd be willing to share maybe some of the mistakes they've made along the way, that, you know, maybe they do differently and what they've learned from that. And Katie, sorry, I'm going to come back to you because we had to cut you off earlier.
Yeah, no, the dogs are quiet again, so fingers crossed that they'll be behaved. Apologies about that. You know, the thing that I would go back and do differently, Leigh, is I would have taken risks a lot earlier in my career. You know, I had opportunities that came my way, and I didn't take them because I thought, how will I make this work? You know, I never wanted to relocate. We live in beautiful Aberdeenshire. We have a lot of commitments in terms of animals. You've heard some of them, but we have horses that we keep at home. We don't have a movable lifestyle. And, you know, I didn't talk about work-life balance, but for me, it's my choice to live here, so I can have all of that. You know, I can have my horses and I can theoretically ride them. I mean, I never actually do because I'm just working 24/7, but theoretically I can ride them. I can look at them and, you know, be in the stables. So I made that choice that we wanted to stay here. But there were so many opportunities that came to me early in my career, and I didn't take them because I thought, how can I make it work? And when I moved to be the area director for the UK about 5 years ago, it had to be based in London. And I was full of anxiety about how am I going to do a job that's based in London when I live in the middle of nowhere in Aberdeenshire? And I thought, you know what? I'll never forget, my mum said to me when I was due to go to university, and at the 11th hour, I didn't want to go because I was terrified. And she said to me, just do it, just give it a shot. And if you don't like it, after 6 months, come home again, and do something else. And, when I moved to London, I thought I'm going to take the same attitude. I'm just going to give it my best shot. And if it really isn't working from a lifestyle perspective, we'll figure something out, and, we'll find a solution. So my advice would be take the risks when you can, because that's how you will flourish in your career. And that's how you will move quicker through your career path if that's what you want to do. So, don't be afraid to say yes, and then figure out the rest of it logistically.
Great. Thank you. And Sue, have you got any regrets? Have you any mistakes that you'd like to share with everyone today?
There isn't one mistake I haven't made, Leigh, to be honest. Tell you something, we need an evening if ever I was going to go through it's very easy to have regrets, but you just keep punching on, you just keep carrying on, and like Katie said, you just keep thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen? You pick yourself back up again. So there's been those moments where I've had those terrible sicky feelings. Helen talked about the Sunday night syndrome, where you have those knots in your tummy and you're like, oh no, how am I going to get through this? But what doesn't kill you make you stronger. I know that's a real cliche, and I've taken a lot of risks to get yes to where it is, and also now taking it to university by taking it to the Internova group, and I'm really, really grateful of doing that. I think the only advice I have is if we can just do the analogy of in a boxing ring, there's many a time where I've thought that referee's just about to get to 10 and I've had to stand up again. And I've been on the ropes many a times. I'm sure many people have, especially in the event industry, especially in the event industry, in this industry that we're in. But we take risks, we lock arms, we help each other, as I said earlier, and we live to tell another story, don't we? We do, wherever that'll be, and hopefully it'll be in person very soon.
Well, hopefully soon, absolutely. And so a lot said about, gut feel and making decisions based on instinct. Helen, have you ever gone against a gut feel, and for whatever reason? That would be quite interesting in itself. And did you live to regret it?
Absolutely. There have been many times when my gut's been telling me one thing and I've done something else, and at the time I haven't listened to it enough. And then, either a couple of days later or weeks later, or you reflect back and you think, oh my God, I knew at the time instinctively this wasn't the right thing to do, and yet it was the easier thing to do. And I think that's one of my biggest learnings. Listen to your gut. And I think if you get a bit older as well, you do tend to listen to your gut more and just pause and reflect for a short while and think, okay, and then you make a decision. So I definitely say listen to your gut. It's wildly important, and actually understand and recognize what that means, if that makes sense, because sometimes you have to sort of make the mistake to learn how to not make the mistake next time.
Oh. Charlotte, sorry, you referenced earlier, you've been through the mill with the last recession and business coming to the wire and then building it again. I mean, they say that no experience is a bad experience, right? Once you've got through it. And what do you think you've learned from some of those near failures or mistakes?
I learned a lot from the 2008 experience, where I had people calling me up saying, you owe us another 30 grand, as an example. And I would just say, well, I don't have it this week, come back next week. I mean, and bearing in mind when it happened, I must have been about, I don't know, 29 or something, or 30 or whatever it was. That's when I look back at 28, 29-year-olds that I know now, that feels very young to be going through a situation like that. And what it has done is it's made this current scenario a lot easier emotionally for me, because if I'm completely honest, I've been able, when it comes to the financials and to business, I've been able to remove the emotions of it much easier now in order for my business capacity to be able to make the decisions I've had to make. And in this particular scenario, I had to make them very, very quickly because I was about to have a baby. So, and I had 2 weeks off. So I had no maternity leave. I think was it Churchill said, only a fool does the same thing over and over again and expects a different response or a different result. I think, I hope that I've managed to, or tried to learn, and I've been very impetuous during my time. And the biggest piece of advice I would give to anybody, because I've fallen foul of this in the past, is never respond to something when you receive an email or that antagonizes you. Leave it for 24 hours.
Yeah.
I've definitely fallen foul of that before. Never respond in haste.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that probably leads us quite nicely into a question that we've just had through from Halima that looks at sort of what advice you'd give to the next generation of female leaders. So if I could sort of couch that in a slightly different way. So if we had a time machine and you're all going to go back and you had 5 minutes with your younger self, what 3 things would you tell yourself? And, that can't be sort of a, stock up on loo roll for 2020. This is very specifically around your leadership style and what would you tell yourself now, knowing what you know? So Helen, let's kick off with you. Oh,
I'm trying to get myself off mute.
There we go, you're off.
Okay, I'm off mute, great. I would basically say, be true to yourself. I've worked with a number of people over my career, and I've, as I mentioned earlier, actually, I've always taken or tried to take the best from the best. But I think the core thing is be your true self, and don't be worried about that. There is no rule book about being the perfect leader, about being the perfect manager, peer. It really is. Be confident in your own abilities. Not everybody is perfect at everything. And as I said, also, build your team around you, network with people who are going to add value to you. And to support you with your career too, in whatever form that may looks like.
Fiddly, this mute button, sorry. So I think one of those learnings, I'll head straight over to Sue, because you touched on earlier before we were live about networking and not being very good at it. So if you had 3 words of advice to your younger self, what would they be?
Well, I wish I'd have known them. I think I'd have had a much calmer life than I've had in this industry that's been a roller coaster. But it really is a journey, and tomorrow is really, really not promised. And we have to really enjoy the ride, because how lovely in this industry has given us all the most incredible experiences, the incredible friendship. And sometimes we're worrying about the next thing and the next thing, and, getting to the end of the event or reconciling it, or getting the next RFP in. And I really, truly, with personal circumstances at the moment, which is pretty sad, is I know that tomorrow is not promised. So you really have to enjoy this industry for all it's worth. Enjoy it and enjoy the people around you, because there is some wonderful, wonderful things that you can get from it.
Brilliant, thank you. Katie, over to you.
Thank you. And I see Michael's asked us another great question. What advice would you give to men in the industry? So my advice is, Michael, male or female, this is what I tell people. First of all, do everything to the best of your ability, and sometimes you have to accept it's not your strength, and you will do things sometimes in your career that you're just not brilliant at. But I always think, as long as I do it the absolute best that I can do it, I couldn't have done any more than that. And I can always be proud at the end of the day that I did everything in my power to be successful with something. Secondly, ask for feedback. And none of us I don't know about the other ladies on the panel, I hate feedback. When people give me feedback, I hate it. Afterwards, I'm like, oh, I can't believe they said that to me. It's not fair. I try to be very open-minded and unbiased and absorb the feedback and go away and think about it, because whether you agree with it or not, it's somebody's perception of you, and that's important that you understand you know, why somebody gives you that feedback. And if they don't proactively give you it, you should ask for it, you know, because it's important for your career development. And the third one I've already talked about, which is, you know, take risks. So, you know, don't be scared to try something or do something or go outside your comfort zone. You know, you heard me say I moved to Eastern Europe at the beginning of last year. It's been the best part of my career so far. I've learned so much, you know, about a different part of the world that I wouldn't have had any experience within, and it really helped me to grow as a leader over this, you know, this really difficult time that we're working in. So yeah, you know, sometimes take the hard way and not the easy way, because you'll learn a lot more from doing it that way.
Fabulous sage advice, thank you. And last but not least, Charlotte, you had a little bit of time to think about it. What would you tell yourself if you could whisper in your ear?
Listen more. Probably. I mean, in my career, I've taken quite a bulldog approach to my career path, largely because there seemed like no other way forward for me, because it was about building a business and hoping that business would survive based on the choices I made. I think listening is very, very important, and almost more important now than talking. So I think that's something that I suffered from when I was younger. Building a team around you that are better than you are, and not to feel intimidated by that in any way, is definitely another piece of advice I would give to my younger self. But also taking on mentorship a lot earlier in my life, and having that from a very young age, actually, and having different people to give you different skills, not just one mentor, but actually a selection of them. One person might be very, very good in a financial perspective. Somebody else might be very good about culture building, you know, and have lots of different skill sets at your disposal.
Great, thank you. I mean, you know, you've all offered some great advice to your younger selves, but you've all done phenomenally well in your careers despite not having that advice. So congratulations to you all. I had a few questions emailed through to me prior to this, and I hope you don't mind if I sort of go flick to them a little bit. Just very quickly, when were you last pushed outside your comfort zone? You know, Helen, let's kickstart you.
Oh gosh, when was I last pushed out my comfort zone? Probably just a few weeks ago, actually attending a client review meeting where I was put on the spot and asked about all sorts of virtual platforms, and what would suit the needs of this particular account client. I'm not going to suggest by any way that I'm a virtual meeting expert, particularly on the different offerings of platforms. But that was certainly one of them, I've got to say. I think I held my own. Yes, I think, as I also mentioned, last year was a particularly tough year. I think we're all sort of holding hands around what happened last year, so there was a number of occasions during 2020 in particular that I was pushed out of my comfort zone. But I think, it's all part of, as my dad used to say, character building, Helen. So, we'll all be stronger for it, for sure.
Yeah. And Sue, what about you? Have you been pushed out your comfort zone recently?
Two things jump out, actually. I think being in a large organisation, I don't know if Helen or Katie agrees with me, when you've been in a small family environment business, and then suddenly you put into a large corporate, it really shook me. And I remember the first time I had to walk into a huge boardroom in America with all these suits, if you like. And I was thinking, goodness me, like, there's no way can I walk into this room. You do it, and you do it, and you pushed out your comfort zone. And just as Helen's dad says, it makes you feel great afterwards. And then that was a positive experience, very positive experience. Very much the new technology, definitely. We're out of our comfort zone, all of us. Claire was saying just at the start of this, and we're all kind of learning a new language, really, aren't we? But I suppose on a sad perspective as well, as Helen said, 2020, having to think for the first time of 20 years of having to consider losing anybody within the business for redundancy or furlough. That was probably one of the worst times of my career, because I'd never had to do it before. So that was very sad, actually.
Which I think I'd like to hear everyone's view on. So I wanted to kick it off now is, what do you think our industry is going to look like in the next few years, given everything that we've been through, and what we're coming out of? What's your projection? If you had a crystal ball, what do you think is going to happen to our industry over the next couple of years? Charlotte, sorry, that was aimed at you.
Apologies, sorry, I missed the beginning of the sentence. Apologies. I think our industry is going to look, well, probably not in the next couple of years, but certainly in the short term, it's a very different landscape. I think a lot of smaller businesses and indeed very big ones have gone by the wayside. So I think that there's been, from what I can see and tell, based on some leading, being on conversations with various industry leaders, there's a swathe of businesses that will survive and have survived and have done very well based on the current environment. But there are, unless we've been able to adapt and evolve and not just be event deliverers, it's only the businesses that have been able to make that move that will survive. So I think our industry in the agency land is going to look very different, and I think there will be fewer of them, very sadly. But I think that the technology side of things will become more refined. I think it's still very clunky. Personally, I think a lot of corporates, from what I'm understanding and what I'm listening to, they're very embedded on which platforms to use. And my personal advice is that actually is a waste of time, because actually you can invest in a lot of different platforms. And quite honestly, one, depending on the functionality, one is almost as good as another. That's my personal perspective. But I think the hybrid version, I think the hybrid and the lack of want to travel to global events, I think that's going to take a long time to come back. So I think the global market for meeting up in different locations is not going to come back in a huge hurry.
Okay, I'm just really conscious of time, and I would like a quick soundbite from everybody. Katie, can we come to you from a hotel provider perspective? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm also looking at it from not just an M&E perspective, but a rooms perspective. And, we see a definite shift in our business that it is all leisure oriented at the minute. So what we see is happening in the business is leisure travel from a rooms perspective, and we're anticipating that that's going to continue. We've seen a flurry of activity, since the announcement that we're going to ease some of the restrictions in England. So that's been a positive sign. But I agree with what Charlotte just said about the mega, the mega events and the global events. We see that there is demand. We still receive inquiries, but they are 2022 and beyond. So people are still, I think, optimistic that they will happen. But beyond that, I think it's incredibly difficult to predict anything right now.
Sue, is there anything else that you could add to that? I know that the ladies have covered quite a lot, but I'd like to hear everyone's view, really, if I had time.
Yeah, I think consolidation, unfortunately, will be key. There'll be M&A opportunities, which rather than seeing it as a negative, see it as a positive, because from my M&A position, it's been a positive. And I know, Leigh, you went through that when you were at banks as well, with Amex. So there'll be some M&A opportunities, good for the smaller agency and good for the larger businesses. But I also feel, and I mentioned at the beginning of the call, actually, before we jumped on air, there is a real need for our consultative services. So rewind when I first started out, 20 odd years ago. People wanted to talk to you about how they could pull an event together or a business solution together or an incentive together. And corporates got a bit clever and thought they could do it themselves, and it was very procurement run. Whereas I feel like now they really need our knowledge and our advice. So if ever there was a time for us to really stand strong, now is the time, because the future, many people do need us like they did many years ago.
Right. Sorry, Helen, you've got 30 seconds. Can you summarise? Oh, there we go, you're off.
Oh, thank you. I'm having terrible technical problems trying to get myself off mute, but I do think that Sue's got a really valid point. We're almost having to reinvent ourselves now. And that will continue for the next couple of years. You know, you're talking about global travel not getting to 2019 numbers until 2022. And a lot of events are global, right? So I do think that, you know, virtual and then moving into hybrid is here to stay. And we'll have to reinvent what that solution looks like and how we keep our customers and suppliers engaged as part of that journey for many years to come. So I think Sue's got a really valid point there, where our value will be even more tested, but even more you know, greater seen, I suppose, from our perspective.
So I think we could have talked about any single one of those topics for an hour at a time, couldn't we, really? But I think your honesty has been brilliant. I think it would be an inspiration to many at whatever stage of their careers, because, you know, we've got young females coming up, but also people who've been furloughed or made redundant or used this time to think about a change of direction. So I think, you know, listening to you today, I think has been phenomenal. So thank you for your time. And on that note, I'll hand back over to Claire. Sorry we've overrun.
No, that's fine. Well done. Thank you all very much indeed. Fascinating hour. It has flown by. I would like to thank, on behalf of EVCOM, Leigh Jagger, Helen Mccabe, Katie Ramsay, Sue Gill, and Charlotte Gentry. You're all wonderful examples of successful businesswomen, and it's been a pleasure to listen to you. So thank you all very much indeed. To our audience, I would remind you that if you check out the EVCOM website, you'll be able to see all the forthcoming events that we are running throughout the month of March in support of International Women's Day. So just a final thank you and goodbye, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye.